Hi, I'm Alicia Michelle, and as a trained and certified Christian mindset coach, I've helped hundreds of Christian women discover brain science based mindset tools to help them grow closer to God and break free from anxiety, perfectionism, people pleasing, and feeling like they're never enough. The Christian Mindset Coach is the award winning podcast that shows you how to use simple brain science principles and biblical truth to renew your mind for lasting confidence, joy, and peace. I'm so glad you're here. Grab a cozy spot and let's get started. Why is life so hard? And when will it get any better? When will God show me His will for my life? When will I have better finances, a cleaner house, more friends? When will I have more peace? When will my husband and my kids change so that things can be more peaceful and I can be happier? Why isn't God solving this issue in my life? Have you ever asked yourself these sort of questions? They're often the root of victim thinking, complaining, and procrastination. Things that we don't want, but many of us secretly struggle with this. How much freer could we be, friends, if we didn't have these weights holding us down? Well, we are in episode 2 of this mental fitness series, and today's guest is the perfect person for this topic. He is passionate about helping those of us who face these sort of questions get to the root of what's behind them so that we can know how to solve them. John G. Miller is the author of the best-selling book, QBQ, The Question Behind the Question, and he's a passionate advocate for personal accountability. As the founder of QBQ, he is helping organizations make personal accountability a core value, and he has facilitated over 10,000 hours of corporate training and leadership development. His practical message empowers individuals to replace blame, procrastination, and victim thinking with ownership and action. He and his wife, Karen, live in Denver and are proud parents of 7 and grandparents to many. And in our conversation, you'll hear him say he is about to be a grandparent to his 15th grandchild. So I first heard John speak actually not in person that I was going to tell you about. I heard him speak years ago on the Dave Ramsey show. And I remember my husband got his book, The QBQ, and had read it. And it kind of sat on our shelf for a while and we forgot about it. And then I was at a conference earlier this year, and he was our one and only keynote speaker. It was a conference that didn't really have a lot of speakers. In fact, it didn't have any speakers. That's a whole other topic. But he was someone who was brought in as a surprise to just inspire us and encourage us. And I thought, remember this guy? He's the QBQ guy. This is so interesting and so timely. So this book and this concept of QBQ that he's been speaking about, it's been around for over 15 years. And the book itself has 1 million copies in print. Just think about that. 1 million copies. That's a lot of copies, guys. And we're going to talk about these principles. Now, QBQ, the principles that are in QBQ, of course, did not originate with John Miller. He's just the guy who's kind of put them all together into this format. But I love his commitment to say, this is how we can take action. This is how we can solve things. And when you'll learn a little bit more about his Enneagram number in here, I'm going to let you listen for that. You'll understand why this is a perfect fit for his personality. So without any further ado, here is that interview with John G. Miller. Well, John, welcome to the podcast today. Thanks for being here with us.
Thank you, Alicia. Glad to be here.
Yeah. So for those of us who aren't familiar with QBQ, can you set the scene for what QBQ means and
Sure.
how it's built on this idea that we often jump to the negative first?
Interesting question because it's negative to blame, whine, complain, and point fingers. It's positive to practice personal accountability. And that's what QBQ is all about. QBQ, Alicia, stands for the question behind the question. And it's simply a concept that I created from real world experience. I didn't make this up at Cornell where I went to school, or I didn't steal it from another author or speaker. For years, I sold management training, and I sat in, I think, probably 10,000 hours of workshops over a decade. And I listened to people in subtle ways and some overt ways blame each other, point fingers, complain.
Yeah.
And one day I said, there must be a better path. So instead of asking, why do we have to go through all this change? how about asking, what can I do to adapt to the changing world? Instead of asking, when will my husband or my wife do more for me? How about asking, how can I serve her or him more effectively? So all I did was I started turning questions around and I went out and taught it as the question behind the question. And to this day, I don't know who first called it QBQ, whether it was me or a client group.
Oh,
But I know that I
okay.
went to Des Moines, Iowa to teach it once way back in 1996. And the next day, the client called me and said they had put a big QBQ on the wall, probably back then with a projector,
Yeah.
to help them remember to be accountable and not complain about each other.
Mm,
So QBQ stands for the question behind the question, and it's all about personal accountability, which is
okay.
now Matthew 7, 1 through 5,
Mm,
where we were instructed to, before you remove the speck from your wife's eye, take the beam out of your own. And that's what QBQ is all about. So instead of asking, when will my manager train me? How about asking, what can I do to develop myself?
yes. Okay. So we're going to get into this a little bit with some specific issues, but I can already hear the questions that people are asking. That's lovely, John. I
Lovely.
want to be accountable for my actions and I want to be the bigger person. But the reality is, my job is doing this to me. My
Yeah.
husband is not treating me this way.
Yeah.
So, like, just off the bat, how do you begin to respond to those kind of things?
Well, I'll respond with, you ever heard of Dave Ramsey?
Oh, yes. Yes.
Okay. So Dave's had me on his program 13 times, but who's counting, Alicia?
Right. Yes.
But Dave would often end the interview with, John, what's the number one takeaway from QBQ? And of course, he can't compete with Alicia when it comes to podcasts. Dave Ramsey
Right.
can.
Very true. Yes.
And I would say, Dave, it's so simple and yet so powerful. I can only change me.
Mm,
And he'd nod his head because he knew that was exactly right. So we can complain about our employer, or we can ask, what can I do to be more effective today? We can complain about our spouse or our best friend, or we can ask, how can I change me today? So I don't mean to jump to the end so quickly, but the most powerful aspect of what we teach in the QBQ book or at QBQ.com is we may be frustrated.
yeah.
We may get angry. We may be hurt by other people, but much of that's a choice. It's a choice to be hurt. It's a choice to be angry. And I can pause that and say, wait a minute, what can I do right now to move forward? We
Yeah.
call that the question behind the question, the QBQ. And there are many QBQs. And in the book, we teach people how to build a QBQ, how to create a better question.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I'm glad you addressed that because I think that it's really easy to just shut off from the beginning from like hearing a statement like, oh, well, just stay accountable and just ask how I can help
Yeah.
me if we don't have that understanding. And for those of you listening, John, you're not familiar with this, but in my work, we talk about ADD, which is the acknowledge, discern, and decide when trying to manage an emotion. So when you're saying take personal responsibility for this, I want you guys listening to hear, John, I don't think you're saying you're not allowed to acknowledge what you're feeling, the
Sure.
reality of the
Right.
pain of it. You're just saying, I'm not going to let that pain dictate how I act. I'm not going to let that drive my decision that I'm making with it.
You're way younger than I am. But one thing going on in the younger generations today is it's all about feelings.
Yes, yes,
Everything's about emotions.
yes.
Like we don't confront our children and tell them to stop playing with a 6-inch steak knife without giving them a very long explanation and making sure we're gentle.
Yes, yes.
A lot of stuff about feelings today. I come from the boomer generation, born in 1958, and we didn't talk about feelings back then. Okay.
No.
So somewhere in the middle, there's got to be a happy camper kind
Right.
of middle ground between
Yes,
no feelings and it's all about feelings.
totally.
In
Oh,
reality, my thoughts, like my thought is, Alicia's a bad person. She's out to get me. That's
mm,
a thought. So then you say something to me and I immediately twist it and I'm angry because she's out to get me. That's my thought. Now I have a feeling of anger or I'm hurt or I'm paranoid or I'm suspicious. Well, now I have an action. Well, the feeling drives the action. I've got to control those feelings. And you
yes.
know all this. I'm preaching to the choir, I know. But so if I change my thoughts, what can I do to be a better friend to Alicia?
Mhm.
And I'm not thinking Alicia is a bad person. I now have a thought that's positive. Well, I could do this or that, so that would lead to positive action. So I'm very much a cognitive kind of guy, thoughts, emotions, behaviors.
Yes. No, agreed. I think that I mean, it's a proven fact in brain science that our thoughts dictate our emotions, emotions drive our decisions, decisions drive our actions.
Yep.
I just wanted those listening to hear that we're not simply shutting down,
Nope.
saying they don't exist. We're saying, what are you going to do with them? Are you going to keep living in them and letting them fester so that you become this person who is making these IQs, which I know you're going to get to in a second?
Yeah.
That's the thing we need to do. So moving
Agreed.
forward.
Because if we just focus on how I'm feeling that day, it's
Yeah,
going to drive us toward negative behavior quite often.
sure.
But if I go through life, Alicia, looking to be offended,
Mhm.
and
Oh, yeah.
everything you say and do offends me, what good is that? Life is too short to be offended. Or offended is another word for probably anger or hurt. So, hey, how about me not getting offended so often? And
Yeah,
how about John Miller asking, how can I be a better John Miller? How can I be a better
right.
me? Instead of saying, that Alicia, she offended me again.
Exactly. Well, it's like a filter you put on. Like every time every time I'm around John, I'm gonna think
Yes,
this thought. You're gonna throw it at me, I'm gonna throw it back at you. Every
right.
time I'm around John, I'm gonna think this thought because, oh, he said that before. And so we
Yeah,
walk into these situations where we're just setting ourselves up. So
agreed.
yes. Okay, cool. So there's QBQ, question behind the question. What are IQs? Can you explain that?
An IQ, incorrect question. That's what IQ stands for. The shortest acronym you can have. You can't really have an acronym that starts with one letter. You need at
Yes.
least two letters.
Yes.
Incorrect question. As we teach in the book, anything that starts with why and leads me to a pity party, a victim
Yeah.
thinking. Why is this
Yeah.
happening to me?
Mhm.
Why don't they support me more? Why don't I ever get a break? Why doesn't my employer treat me better? Why don't I get paid more?
Yep.
Why questions tend to take me to victim thinking, entitlement,
Mm.
feeling sorry for myself. And here's the key question. I ask this of groups all the time, and you saw me speak. I may have asked it that day, I don't know. But when I play victim, I always warn the audience, careful with your answer. When I play victim, who am I serving? Pause, control your thoughts, careful with your response. Because people want to say, I'm only serving myself. No, no, no. I'm not serving anybody when I play victim. I'm
Exactly.
not serving mankind or humankind, but I'm also not becoming a better person. I'm not growing if I'm playing victim. The second IQ type, incorrect question, it begins with when. When will they get back to me? When will they change? When will they stop behaving like that? When will they treat me better? That's procrastination. When questions lead me to procrastination, habitually deferring action to a future time. So as long as I'm asking, when will Alicia treat me like she should? I'm not asking, what can I do to treat Alicia better? And then the who questions lead us to blame. Who dropped the ball? Who missed the deadline? Who made the mistake? Who left the peanut butter and the bread all over the counter?
Yep. Yep. Yep.
And who questions lead me to blame, finger pointing. Who done it questions. We have another book called Outstanding 47 Ways to Make Your Organization Exceptional. And one of the chapters is about not seeking culprits.
Mm.
Outstanding organizations don't seek culprits. People don't run around saying, who made the mistake? But initially in the QBQ, we teach the danger of asking whodunit questions. So in review, incorrect questions, IQs, begin with why, when, and who. They take us to victim thinking, procrastination, and blame. And there's a better path. And the better path, the higher path is personal accountability.
Okay. Okay. The who question. I want to ask you a question about the who question.
Mhm.
So the who question, like you gave the example of who left the peanut butter and jelly out,
Right.
and I know you're a dad of 7 kids, so you get this. I'm a
I
mom.
am?
You are? Did you know that?
No. Well, we're empty nesters. They're all gone. They're all
They're all
married.
gone.
Thank
That's
you,
what
Lord.
because I'm a mom of 4 and I have one gone. The other ones are all
Ooh.
teens and they're gone a lot, but they're still here. So like, does the peanut butter and jelly still get put away eventually? Like it will go away.
I know where you're going with this. We don't
Okay.
enable our kids by not confronting them and teaching
Hey,
them to
you
clean
knew
up
it.
the peanut
See?
butter and the
You
jelly.
get this. You
We
get this.
just,
So where is that line? Yeah, especially as a
yeah,
parent.
that's called judgment.
Okay.
That's the gray area. I mean, when we run around saying who done it, we create fear. But when we run around sometimes and have to say, hey, Tony, would you please come back here right now and clean up the peanut butter and the jelly you left on the counter? That's just good parenting.
Right.
In the organizational setting, too often it's who made the mistake as opposed to what can I do to solve the problem?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
managers will say who made the mistake as opposed to what can I do to be a better coach?
Sure.
What can
Sure.
I do to be a better trainer? So
Yeah.
back to parenting. If we have a son or a daughter who's constantly, repetitively doing the same thing over and over, and
Right.
I have a family in mind right now, not mine, but related to mine, where the 18-year-old son just continues to engage in bad behaviors, and the mom vents and yells and complains and vents, but never administers any consequences.
Mm,
He still has his car. He still
right.
gets a tank of gas. He still has his license in his pocket. He still gets to go see his girlfriend. They never implement any consequences.
Mm.
So if you've got a child who continually engages in wrong behaviors, that's when we step in. And, we wrote a book called Raising Accountable Kids, if you don't mind me sharing it.
Ah,
And
yeah.
that's what that book's all about is
Okay.
strong, love-based, logical parenting.
Right.
And yes, sometimes we have to confront our kids for continuing to leave the PBJ on the counter.
No, because I can just hear a mom, especially if she's a mom who already just is so committed to her kids and serving and is just like, okay, so then what I need to do is just say, how can I fix this? I need to pick up that PB&J
Right.
and I
Yeah.
just need to be the servant and God is going to honor that. And it's like, sure, that's the right answer. I mean,
Yeah.
I get her heart. I get her heart is like, what can I do? But the what can I do sometimes is to confront, it's if in a
Yeah.
parent situation, confront and love.
Well, we could talk about parenting for a long time,
Yeah.
and you should have my wife on sometime because she's a female and that's your audience mostly. I
Yeah.
understand that.
Yeah.
But too often we have learned as boomer parents that younger parents, I'm not labeling anybody specifically, something has crept into parenting. They seem afraid to be blunt,
Mm.
and because they are afraid that their kids will think they're mean.
Mhm.
But we
Mhm.
look back to the '90s when we were raising all these kids, and we can recall a few things we had to do, and we weren't concerned if the 12-year-old thought we were mean. These were our absolutes. These were our principles. These were our standards, and we're going to hold you to it.
Mm.
So there has been a shift in parenting. Once in a
Yeah.
while, someone will read the Raising Accountable Kids books and they'll go,
Yeah.
boy, that book, I mean, they'll say, man, we've been taught to not yell, not be harsh, not be mean. Well, nobody in this book says be mean, but we
Right.
are saying boundaries matter.
Yes.
Principles
Yes.
matter. Absolutes matter. You must decide what your family believes in. And if keeping a clean kitchen and picking up after yourself is one of your absolutes, then you're going to have to talk to the child about that. And if he continues to resist, something has to go.
Right. For sure. No, for sure. All right. Well, you mentioned when questions and how that
Yeah.
relates to procrastination. So they feel, I think a when question, it almost feels reasonable at the start. Like we're dreaming of this time when, we have a kid who's in diapers, when they get out of diapers, we have a kid who's
Oh,
18 and when will they
yeah.
get out of the house? Like things will get better. What is that question, the QBQ we can ask to get us out of waiting and into just a different mindset to move forward?
Well, the QBQ has 3 guidelines. We teach in the QBQ book and at QBQ.com how to build that better question, that QBQ, that question behind the question.
Okay.
And we touched on one of them a little bit. The first guideline is QBQs begin with the words what or how.
Mhm.
We want to help all of us stay out of that victim mode, procrastination mode, that blame mode. So this is not literal. It does not mean you never say why. Doesn't mean you never say when or who.
Yes.
But if our intent in the why section is to play victim, stop it. If
Yeah.
the intent in the when section of life, when will they do? If our goal there ends up just being doing nothing, taking no action, when will the schools do this or that? Well, what can I do to get on the school board and make a difference?
Sure.
That kind of thing.
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
the who questions lead us to blame, so we want to start questions with what or how. But then we also want to put the word I, the personal pronoun I in them. So because we can only change ourselves, we can come back to that. We did touch on it. But the last guideline of the QBQ is all about action. Question behind the question leads me to doing something. So if you picture most people who play the victim, there's a lot of verbal whining and complaining about other people, institutions who aren't fair to them, whatever. And there's very little action. Well, what can I do today to find a new job? What can I do
Yeah.
today to make a difference? How can I right now improve my skills? So we want to get away from lamenting what everybody else is not doing or doing to me
Right.
and do something ourselves. There's a quote in the book. I wrote the book. if- There's a quote in the book that says, I'd rather be the person who is sometimes told to wait than be the person who waits to be told.
Mm.
That's part of my personality. I just happen to be the kind of guy who takes action, gets things done. If you know Enneagram, I'm an 8.
Oh, okay.
Eights are great.
Yes.
Eights rule the world, okay?
Yeah.
If you know Myers-Briggs, I'm an ESTJ.
Yeah.
That's just my personality, but it still applies to all of us. Sometimes we just need to do something. We
Mhm.
need to take action. Of course, as you know, because you probably know psychology better than I do, taking action can create endorphins, good feelings, good emotions, energy, all those things. So QBQ is very much about getting stuff done and not blaming others for what they're not doing or waiting for others to take action.
Hey, friend, quick question. Do you feel like you are managing your emotions or are they managing you? If you've ever found yourself overthinking, stuffing your feelings, or reacting in ways that you regret, been there, then I've got something fun for you, a quick, free quiz to reveal your emotional confidence persona. In just 2 minutes, you'll discover your biggest challenges in managing emotions, and you'll get a free series of short video trainings from me packed with practical tips to find more calm and peace based on your results. And did I mention it's totally free and fun? Take the quiz, How Emotionally Confident Are You? Now at aliciamichelle.com/quiz. That's aliciamichelle.com/quiz.
Yes. Great point. So, speaking of waiting, that was the question that I think sometimes comes into Christian circles is I'm waiting on God for
Sure.
answers. I'm waiting to hear from God. When will he show me what to do? It's
I got all kinds of things to say about that,
gonna
okay?
say, go for it. Go for it.
First of
Yeah.
all, let me tell you my background. I grew up in Ithaca, New York, went to Cornell. My dad was Cornell wrestling coach for 25 years. My dad was also a pastor for 40 years.
Oh, okay.
I grew up in a very strange home. Every day I'd get out of bed and I'd have to ask, which one will he be? The grace-filled, forgiving, loving pastor or the wrestling coach with the big biceps? And
Oh,
so I came out of that world and then married Karen. She was 19 when we married. I was 22. We're hitting 45 years this year. So that's all good. Thank you.
yes.
But what I learned, faith without work is dead.
Yes.
So, an Enneagram 8, an ESTJ for Myers-Briggs, John Miller, I'm going to rely on that kind of a verse. Faith
Sure.
without work is dead.
Yes.
I could say I'm cherry picking scripture, which people do. But I had a Christian mentor back in the 90s, a man 10 years older than I am, very godly, God loving man named Rick. And he once said, God will not steer a parked car.
Mm. Oh, no. Amen.
All he was saying is sometimes you got to do something.
Yeah.
Back in the 70s, I know, before indoor plumbing, but you were born that decade.
I was.
I had a friend who had become a Jesus lover overnight. When
Okay.
Jesus Saves was a big movement.
Yeah.
He was now a Jesus lover. I'd kind of grown up in that Christian home. I, of course, had to accept Jesus as my own Lord and Savior. And I did that when I was 16. But about the same time, my friend Jerry became a Jesus lover. Well, guess what this Jesus lover now did? He would now stay in bed all day waiting for Christ to tell him what to do next.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So between my buddy saying God's not going to steer a parked car and faith without work is dead, and my friend laying in bed all day wondering when Jesus was going to tell him what to do, I'm just the opposite of all that. I like to get stuff done. I do believe when we take action, if we're prayerful people, godly people, we could be blessed, but we also make mistakes, and that's okay too, because that's when we learn a lot.
Yeah. No. Amen. I'm right
Yep.
there with you. I feel it. I'm an Enneagram 1,
Ah,
but so I
perfectionist.
am perfection. So
Yep.
I'm more, the hesitation that I feel is to make sure that I'm doing it right.
You have the inner critic. The inner
Yes.
critic. And I could,
Inner
you
critic.
know more than I do about it, but our daughter, Molly, child number 4, who's now 35 and carrying her 5th child, yeah, that's going to be grandkid number 15 this year.
Oh my gosh. Wow. That's
She,
amazing.
thank you. She's an Enneagram 1 to the hilt. She has that inner critic. She's always making sure she does stuff exactly right. And she would tell you that because of that need to do it right, she will sometimes, quite often, procrastinate.
Yes. Yes. No, that is something that I run into. So
Should-
I know I kind of stole your thunder, the closer that Dave would give you at
That's all
the
right.
end of an interview.
I
But
brought it up.
what would you say to
But
kind of keep as that one nugget that would be important to remember, or something you go back to with QBQ that helps you?
well, absolutely. 11 years into our marriage, my wife said, Johnny, I'm going to marriage counseling. You coming?
Yeah.
And we went. And we went. This was before people went to therapists left and right. We
Yeah.
went to marriage counseling 11 years into our marriage. Between that, growing up in an alcoholic home, I won't go into any more details there. The work I was doing selling management training in Minneapolis, St. Paul from 86 to 95. So I was out selling every day to executives, and selling is all about psychology. We won't get into that now, but if you know how to sell, you're dealing with the buyer's mind.
Yes.
Then I'm sitting in 10,000 hours of these management training workshops for a decade. So you put all those things together. And one day, Karen and I realized, and we still have, frustrations on it sometimes with each other. But one day we realized the simple truth, and that's redundant because all truths are simple. I can only change me.
Yeah.
So I go out and I teach QBQ. Our daughter, Kristen, who was born in 83, way younger than you, she goes out, she teaches QBQ. And we go out and we talk about power of personal accountability. And sometime we have to ask the ultimate QBQ. And here it is.
Okay.
How can I let go of what I can't control?
Mm-hmm.
You got to be like Elsa. Let it go. How can I let go of what I can't control?
Yeah.
And the minute I start asking that, the inverse of that is, well, what can I do to change the things I can control? What can I do to change me? We go out and teach that. And we've had married folks walk right up to us at the end of the session saying, I need to go home. And right now, today, I need to say to my spouse, I'm sorry. I've been trying to fix you.
Yeah.
And I'm done. And I've had people then report back 3 months later that everything was better, not perfect, but everything was better the
Right.
day they decided to work on themselves. So in the end, I can only change me.
Yes. Awesome.
Oh.
Well, where can we find more info about you?
Oh, thank you. QBQ.com. I always laugh at that question, not because I'm laughing at you, but back in the day when I used to do radio interviews, we'd give out 800 numbers and we'd give out street addresses. And now it's just QBQ.com.
You
Just
got
come
3 letters to remember. That's it. There's nothing
3 letters,
else.
right. Yep.
Well, John, it is a pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much for what you're doing, and thank you for what you shared with us today.
Thanks, Alicia. It was great fun.
Thanks. You can listen to an interview like that and take it one of 2 ways. You can take it as kind of like when you take the car into the shop and you realize this car is just like every time I drive it, it's kind of steering to the left. So you can take that information that John shared and you can see it as just personal realignment. Like, all right, that's good stuff. Like I've been sliding into blame and procrastination and victim thinking in all of these other areas of my life. That was a good reminder, Lord. I hear you. Or you can take it and be really offended. Like, well, what about his responsibility for this? And what about they are wronging me? And what about they do need to change in these areas? And so I'm curious first, how did it hit you to hear some of these things? And second, if you are in that second camp, it would be wise, I think, to take some time with the Lord and let this kind of simmer in your heart. Just let it sink in and see, is there any valid point to this, right? And what he's saying. And second, to reaffirm the truth that we were saying throughout this, that by taking personal accountability and taking action from that perspective and not going into the when questions and the who questions that he was talking about, by taking that personal accountability, we're not minimizing the pain. We're not minimizing the reality that, someone might be hurting you. You might need to make some decisions. I think, we brought up that part about parenting, that it's not just about, I'm just going to take on this burden and I'm not going to address the reality of what needs to be talked about. It's an action forward thinking process that doesn't keep us spinning in the spin cycle. QBQ keeps us focused on our part, our side of the street, and allows us to not get stuck in those other things that we have no control over. So let me know what you think about this episode, how it hit you. What are some things that you're like, oh yeah, no, that was for me, this part. You can reach out to me on Instagram. It's at Alicia Michelle Coach. And I would love to hear from you. Or if you'd like, you can leave a review and rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcast. On Apple Podcasts specifically, you can leave a comment. I would love to hear what you took from this episode. And even if there are other episodes on related topics that you would like to hear about. So go ahead and leave a comment and a review if you are on Apple Podcasts, and or reach out to me on Instagram. I would love to continue this conversation. All right, guys, I'll see you back here next week for next week's episode.
Thanks for joining me today for the Christian Mindset Coach. If you loved today's show, would you take 2 seconds and share a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts? I've got a special gift for you when you share a review, my amazing 50 I Am declarations, 50 statements and Bible verses about who you are in Christ. This is an audio meditation and a written statement that is extremely popular with my clients, and I want to give you access just for sharing your Apple Podcast review. Simply screenshot your review and send it to hello@vibrantchristianliving.com, and we'll send you the link to access the 50 I Am Declarations resource. Thanks so much for sharing your rating and review so that we can get the word out about the podcast. See you back here next week.